Stupid, season 3, episode 69. So we end our seasons on 69 episodes because we're childish, mostly. And tonight we have a special guest, Kyle Schaefer, Captain Kyle Schaefer, who I randomly found on the internet, and turns out he lives in York, and I messaged him, and he decided to come on and talk some fishing with us. So thanks for coming on, Kyle. We really appreciate it. Tell us a little about yourself to start.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Awesome to be here. Wasn't a terribly,
you can just pull it down.
Wasn't a terribly far commute being in York. So what a nice excuse for a beer and a chat.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess I've been kind of a career-long fly fishing guide. Got my start out west in Colorado, as many people do, you know, guiding trout fishing. Fell in love with it. 4 knee surgeries later, after a lot of skiing out there, fly fishing really took the front seat, and so I've stayed on it as a career for myself. And in between when I got my start, and then I've guided in Argentina for golden dorado. I still guide for striped bass. I've got a lodge in the Bahamas. I've worked for some other folks in the Bahamas as well, and just love it. Kind of all on a sight fishing focus, and
that's incredible. And I think probably the first time I was watching some random YouTube videos, and you popped up on John B's striped bass trip that he had up here, and that I followed you on Instagram after that. But in the past year, with all the striped bass stuff going on and the conservation and stuff with that, I've noticed you on the forefront of getting that into the public's eye, and I think that's awesome. First of all, just because I know very little about it, and I'm always wanted to learn more about it, especially being a fairly novice fly fisherman. I want to learn more about the conservation side of it, and seems like you're, along with other people, are doing a really good job of portraying that. So what are one question that we ask, we've had a couple guides on, and we had Tom Rosenbauer on from Orvis, and I asked him, I said, if you became the head of DNR or the head of whatever, what would be your changes? That's kind of like how I like to start the questions off.
That's a great question. I think the biggest changes that you have to have is really just having like a balanced, kind of a balanced mechanism for input. A lot of times you have, kind of, for example, with striped bass, since we're kind of chatting all around that, is, there are some really well organized groups that can lobby to get what they want. And that might be like the party boat fleet, or that might be commercial, which, and by no means am I picking a favorite sector, but it's just, these are really well organized groups. Then you look at recreational anglers, we're all over the place. We're fishing with flies, we're fishing surf casting. So we really, at the end of the day, we need to get the information out to the whole public. What does everybody want? And at the end of the day, we all want abundance and long-term and longevity out of our fisheries. And I think that's the biggest thing. If we have a long-term game plan, we're in a lot better shape.
That's one of the hardest things that we had Greg Labonte on, and we talked at length about that, about the conservation, not necessarily the conservation, but how do you build a fishery back? Because it seems like no one really knows. Because a lot of it is luck. Because believe it or not, we influence it, but Mother Nature's a hell of a beast, and we can't really control it. We can harm it, and we can help it a little bit. A lot of my information comes back from duck hunting and what happens there. You can say that, humans are killing ducks, and it's well, not really. Nature kills a shit ton more ducks than any human ever will. And it's sort of that way with fish. Are we influencing it enough? Yeah, probably. But to see the regulations coming out and the disparity, and even in just regions of the same fishery, it's okay, none of us are on the same page. You have the Chesapeake Bay that just says, fuck you guys, we're going to do what we do. And it's okay. And then the regulations that get pushed up here are really, all right, rec anglers, you're our problem. And it's like, well, is it really a problem if you don't want to address the guys that are taking them commercially? And, you know, you're not really restricting charter boats down to like, okay, let's, you know, it's on the individual angler and the individual captain to maintain a healthy catch rate. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, but your rec angler, you can only keep one because you're going to, if you keep two, that's going to destroy our population. It's like, is it though? Like that's and then, I mean, I know you said redfish and like the Louisiana, the stories that came out of the Gulf from NOAA's estimations and stuff, like how do you justify that as NOAA saying, oh yeah, sorry about that article that just got published where we were lying to everyone,
right? And
it's like, so you've just shot yourself in the foot if you're trying to actually do good,
right?
And that's where I have a hard time with like supporting like I want to support smart regulation,
yeah,
but it's like, who can you trust? Like you were saying, like who has the biggest voice to influence the restrictions onto the groups that they're not involved in. Right. And that's what it feels like personally up here is like rec anglers are getting smoked, but no change to commercial.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's not like the ground fisheries where we've seen the ground fisheries getting hammered, but they cut it for everyone.
Right.
It's not like they're sitting there saying, oh, well, there's no more, you know, the striped bass quota for commercial. Oh yeah, no, we're not changing that. It's like,
yeah, and that's coming. We've got, you know, we're right now in a public comment period for striped bass, which we're gonna have our day here coming up soon for Maine and New Hampshire, and that's on the chopping block too. Is commercial.
Yeah,
they're gonna take a cut, but honestly, you know, unless we have some successful spawns, none of these regulations are going to matter,
right?
Because we're just going to, even if it's just to catch and release mortality, our fishery is going to keep just dwindling, and everybody's taking some fish. Commercial maxed out last year, you know. We're going to keep whacking these fish until we start having some successful spawns and fish start coming up. And,
yeah,
you know, and at the end of the day, that was a huge hit with NOAA and them overestimating effort.
It's just,
and so it's just, you have this whole foundation in which you're building all of your assumptions and management on, and when that gets shaken, it's really tough. And I'll actually be in DC on December 4th advocating for more money to put towards data, talking to our congressmen and senators about how important this is and trying to affect some change, because we need to pump some more money in it. It really is like, you know, the foundation for all the work that we're doing. And at the end of the day, I mean, whether it's commercial or rec, we do have a huge impact on the, you know, on the fishery. And I think a lot of people were bummed that we, especially with the changes that happened this season, that it just was the rec anglers carrying the burden.
And I think that's where, like, I look at it from, and even just something simple as like mackerel. Like, I heard guys this year, because we all fish out of, you know, Kittery, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's like, guys, I talked to so many guys at the boat ramp that were like, oh, mackerel are out. There's no mackerel around.
Right.
And it's like, okay, where did you go? And that's one of the other things that, like, I have a hard time, like, it's an impossible task for NOAA to be able to say, this is your striped bass population. Because, I mean, it's in the ocean. Kind of fucking hard to see. Like, but when you have guys that are going out and having banger days, and it's like, well, is it really? And I think that's where a lot of that, and then you just creep in those seeds of mistrust, and it's like,
right,
you guys are in an impossible spot to have a stand. And I mean,
for sure,
NOAA's never really been a great ally to fishermen. I feel like no matter what fishery it is, whether it's lobster or fuck the right whale stuff, and it's just, but it is our, you know, like, it's your livelihood to make sure that the fishery is here. So it's like, what can we do to still participate in the fishery, but also rehabilitate that fishery?
Yeah, and what are some, like, from a guide standpoint to us rec fishermen, what are some tips? I mean, obviously you have like keep the catch and release stuff, keep the fish wet. Is that making a difference? You know, what Garrett and I do when we're out on the water, because I mean we try to be mindful of what we're doing with the fish to take care of it. Does that really make a difference in the long run, in your opinion?
It honestly, it really does. It really does, especially when you have a fishery like striped bass where they're migrating through the most populated states in the entire country, some of the most popular places in the world. You know, I mean, the fishing outside of Hudson Bay is I mean, Hudson River is insane.
Yeah.
You know? So you've got, it really does make a huge impact. And I don't know if you guys noticed it, but this year, I mean, luckily here we are talking about a struggling striped bass population, but I, alongside of so many other folks in this area, had some of the best big bass fishing that we've ever had this past summer.
Massive
Localized
fish.
abundance, which has to come with a big asterisk. Like, we were lucky that these bass just sat off our coast and we got to hang out with them for a while.
Yeah.
But each fish we are catching, you're looking in their mouth, there was multiple hooks removed from each of these fish.
Yeah.
So it's not like these are like juggernaut fish that are just come inshore and we're just catching them for the first time. Like, these fish have been caught and released, caught and released, caught and released. For one, it shows the value of catching and releasing fish. Of course, I'm not against keeping the right fish at the right time, but you know, to be able to catch these fish, release them successfully is huge, and the economic impact of each of those fish is incredible.
Yeah.
And you know, so it really does make a big difference. I mean, you know, some fish are hardier. I think in Maine here, we've got cold water. A lot of times we're catching them in this cold water, and that's you know, those fish have a good chance of, if you're fighting them quick and handling them well, like they're probably going to swim off strong. Maryland, it's a different story. New Jersey in the summer, it's a different story in August. So it really kind of all depends, and I think you just have to use your judgment. But there's a lot of people out there that they might be the weekend warrior, where they might fish 3 weekends a year, and I think you have hundreds of thousands of folks like that.
Yeah.
And the education to get to those folks, I think, is probably even more important than a lot of the professionals or the folks that are really doing it and really keyed into the fishery.
You see,
But it matters for sure.
I'm sure you saw earlier this year when the stripers were in that they shut down that section in Saco.
Yeah.
And of course there was a massive I don't know what the word is, blowback as far as why are they shutting it down, not letting us do that. You saw it all across social media, especially on Facebook, for like striped bass forums. And I think if those people were just educated to a point of, you know, why it was doing it, because it was killing fish needlessly,
Right.
it would be more understanding. But it just seemed like the state, any other regulatory commission, wasn't putting that information out there. They just basically said it's closed to fishing.
Right.
And then you look back at some of these guys' posts that were complaining about it, and you're looking at fish that are covered in gravel from sitting on the side of the road.
For sure.
They're working them up over a banking that
For sure.
Fishing from a parking lot, which, I mean, obviously are those are all factors, and I just don't think they understand it.
I don't think they're going to either.
Yeah.
And nor do they give a shit to.
Right.
Like, there's some, at some point you just got to cut bait and make fucking chum. Like,
Yeah.
it is what it is. You're going to have people that just don't give a fuck, aren't going to listen. Even if you tell them, like, look, if you don't do it this way, if you go 5 feet down the bank to be able to catch that, you know, keep that fish in the water, that fish has a 70% greater chance to live next year. I don't think people really give a fuck, because that's the way their father did it. And, you know, it's sort of like the downside of Maine. It's why I make the joke about how the deer hunters are the degenerates of hunting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just one of those things where it's like, man, I don't want to say it, but 9 times out of 10, it's a spin fisherman. Not saying that fly fishing is superior, but I feel like you find way more conservation the more craftier you get in sport, like in anything.
I agree with that.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, fly fishing is such a deep dive. I definitely, you know, I love all methods, but I mean, to catch a fish on the fly. You got to get close. You got to put your time in. You got to study it. You've already, to throw a. It's just a high barrier to entry.
Yeah,
for sure. So I think you have a lot of those folks in the fly fishing industry kind of punching above their weight.
Yeah,
and even it's cool. There's a lot of companies out there that really recognize that the people that are advocating from the fly fishing side they're loud, and they're speaking loudly for clean water. They're speaking loudly for fisheries management. And, and a lot of this stuff comes from, ASMFC that manages our striped bass stocks. Like, that's really where a lot of the failures are coming from, is we just need foresight, you know, and we need, like, when things start sliding, let's just get out in front of it. We're very reactionary. ASMFC is very reactionary. And I mean, striped bass have been sliding since 2006,
right?
We've had so many signs, and now here we are sitting on 5 dreadful spawn years, fish are getting whacked.
But then, like, you also and part of it is knowing this area for as long as I have, and like my father grew up fishing here. My grandfather was a tuna fisherman out of York. Like, they were harpooning tuna off Boone Island. Like, that's how that fishery was. Now, that was a complete overfish fishery,
right?
But stripers weren't around.
Yeah,
and stripers really didn't come in until the tuna were pushed out, because now they have food up here. And that's like, my father never caught a striper in his life until I took him out. Like, it's so it's like, are these fish going somewhere else? Like, it's a big fucking ocean. I mean, we are seeing more mortality rates, especially inland. Like, I saw more fish floating this year in the river than ever.
Totally.
Like, I couldn't tell you. And whether it's bad angling, whether
it seemed like for a span of time this summer, we were going out one night a week striper fishing, whether it was going out and getting bait or coming back in and doing rod and reel stuff, or we were fly fishing. It seemed like every week we were seeing a dead striper floating in the river somewhere. Which I had, in all my years, I've never seen that before. What constitutes a bad spawn year and a good spawn year? Like, where does that data come from, as far as, so the fish that we catch up here spawn from the Chesapeake, typically?
Largely. Yeah. So, about 85% of the population spawns in the Chesapeake, and so it's, the vast majority of the fish that we're fishing for. You've got Delaware Bay, you've got, the Hudson River, and then some other less meaningful spawning grounds. The Kennebec is, a spawning ground where fish actually migrate out and go south, which is pretty interesting. Or stick around and do some strange things. What was your question? Holy smokes, I got totally off track there.
Just basically, explaining it to be like a third grader, how do stripers spawn?
Yeah. Okay. So that's right. And so, so they need the right. It's kind of a very finicky. It's a very finicky, environmental condition that they need. So they need the right water levels, and we've had very low water levels in the Chesapeake. They can't be too high. They can't be too low. So if you have too low of water, the eggs might just settle. If you have too high, they may end up in like floodplains. So it's kind of this happy medium, and we just haven't had the right condition when fish are spawning in the spring, and so it's really been, we've needed more water. And you hope that that we have enough big bass around, that there's some resiliency in that. There's enough there's enough eggs, there's enough males in there to make the magic happen. And so we actually get these young of year reports where people go out with seine nets, they actually catch the young small striped bass, count them, and that's the young of year index. And and I think this past year was like one of the worst on record. And so it's a combination of environmental conditions and the number of fish that we actually have in our spawning stock. So that's like the concerning part. It'd be great, man, if we had some good spawning years coming up. But all signs are pointing. And too, at this last ASMFC meeting, nothing drastic happened. Nothing groundbreaking. It's like, all right, let's do let's put these options on the table. Let's let the public weigh in. None of those options will help us rebuild by 2029, which is the mandate. And ASMFC, at the end of the day, is not accountable to their actions.
Right.
So to have a management body that is not accountable, to have Maryland overfish a year at 350%, several years ago, and there's no accountability to any of this, it just kind of takes the wind out of the sails.
Yeah.
And unless we can organize and we can speak up, that's the special sauce. And that's why I believe so much in the Saltwater Guides Association, because Tony Friedrich, who is running the organization, is roping in advocates all across the East Coast and having a big impact. So
the Saltwater Guide Association is a group of saltwater guides, obviously, that
way to get that one together.
Right?
Nice job.
Are lobbying for striped bass, essentially.
Yes.
So you guys are going to DC and talking to the ASMC or those management people and trying to just figure out what's going to work as far as management goes.
Yeah, and it's a little different. Kind of the stuff I talked about with DC is more like the federal management side, which striped bass are not federally managed. So we kind of have to kind of lobby state by state. Each state has 3 commissioners, and so. But at the end of the day, it's really all those commissioners see the public comments when it comes time to make the decision. And Saltwater Guide Association is a little deceiving in the name. It's really for all recreational anglers.
Yeah.
It's really for businesses, shops, for anybody. It can just be helpful to have some kind of an economic driver behind, behind it these days. And so
I had honestly never heard of them until reading some of the stuff that you were posting, and I went to the fly fishing film tour at North Country Cider this past year, and they had a setup there, talking about it, which and I think it's great. I just had never known anything about it.
For sure.
Is there a Seacoast chapter of that, or is there going to be?
It's more so that each state has a board member.
Gotcha.
I'm the board member for Maine. And we're reaching all the way down to Louisiana, where they've got some really exciting stuff happening that is still kind of, kind of the jury's out on where it's going to land. But, there hasn't been a management change for redfish in 30 years or something. And we're asking for a 55% reduction right now. And basically, which is going to put those fish on a rebuilding timeline that is something closer to 12 years. And don't quote me. But the other options are all right, we take a 30% reduction and we rebuild in 30 years. Which to me is kind of unacceptable. That's half of a lifetime of an angler.
Right.
So you've got, just trying to, which all seems kind of common sense.
Yep.
You have to have these fish around to be able to enjoy fishing for them.
Yeah.
You go out there on the weekend, you don't even see a fish. What do you do? Are you going next weekend? Probably not. So abundance drives.
Huey's been fishing for fucking 3 years straight, so.
What's that?
You've been ishing for 3 years straight for that fucking striper on the
I
fly.
still haven't caught a striper on a fly. It's at this point, it's just my arch nemesis. I came close a couple of times this year, and a lot of it for me is time on the water, so I completely get it. But I don't know. It's stressful, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I love doing it. It's probably the only thing I love being stressed about.
Yep. Right. The puzzle man.
Yeah. So
why do you think this is sort of on the topic of rehabilitation of fish, but why has saltwater never gone barbless?
It's a great question.
Because every major trout fishery that is thriving is barbless.
Yeah. And
it's something, obviously, fuck, we can't even get people to use circle hooks if they're fishing conventionally. Right. That regulation's been in for 5 years now, and
people still.
It's probably still only 20% of the people actually listen to that.
Right.
That's one of those things where you should just be able to go to Cater Trading Post and be like, pull all of your hooks and just sell circles.
Yeah.
Because what are people here fishing for? stripers. Okay, so fuck all your regular hooks. I don't need a wall of hooks at Kittery Trading Post.
Right.
You need circle hooks.
Yep.
And that's one of the things. Like, I've thought about it, and I mean, I tie my own flies. Like, I tie a shit ton of flies, and I've never thought about crimping a striper fly just because I'm like, well. But then the more and more, like the last time we talked to Greg, I was thinking about it, and I was like, man, why do they never go barbless?
Right.
Like, every trout fishery that is thriving in this state, and
the last
out
2
west,
years, every fly that every freshwater fly I've tied on, I crimp the barb.
Yeah.
Just out of
either crimp it or I'm buying barbless hooks just because it's a
Right.
lot easier.
just, I don't know. I don't know why I do it. I don't know if it makes a difference. Obviously, it's better for the fish. It makes it. I lied. It does make a difference because when I'm taking the hook out of a fish's mouth, I can just pull the hook out. I'm not fighting with a barb.
Right.
So I could see that making a difference with a striper, but why it's not regulated, I don't know. Probably because there's such a huge. I think the rec side of it has got to be a very small portion compared to the commercial side.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people just don't don't care. Don't think it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. Or I mean, from this freshwater side, I think you always hear guys say, "Well, I don't want to lose the fish without that's why I have a barbed hook." Honestly, I don't think it makes much. If you have pressure on the rod like you're supposed to, you won't lose the fish.
Right.
If it's a good hook set.
For sure.
So
and that's exactly it. Fish are lost at the hook set. As somebody who watches people catch fish for a living, you're like, you see the hook set and you're like, we're gonna be lucky to land this fish.
Yeah.
Barb or not. And if you have pressure on the fish, you're in good shape. I mean, and some people preach like with a barb crimped, you've got less metal now to pass through. So like it might increase your chances of getting that good hook set. And if you have pressure, you're good to go. There's only one fish that I don't debarb on, and it's not a striped bass.
Yeah.
It's a permit. And because if I put a hook in a permit, I don't want that fly coming out for
Yeah.
any reason.
Yeah.
This fish are wily enough. I will admit to that.
Yeah.
But bonefish, striped bass, anything else in between, I mean, it's good for the fish.
We were fishing up in Rangeley this year with a buddy of ours, and we were in his raft. We were going down the McGalloway, and I'm still very novice at fly fishing, and he was explaining to me mending, as simple as it is. And a fish came up and grabbed my fly, and he was like, and I went to set the hook, completely botched the hook set, and he was like, "This is the reason you didn't catch that fish.
Yeah.
You weren't mending. You didn't
Right.
get the hook set right." And then it all made sense. It just, somebody explains it to you like that, it just works out better.
Totally. It's usually like 2 or 3 steps ahead of the actual hook set where things started to go wrong. And a lot of it's tension based, slack in the system, whatever it may be.
And I immediately cast it back out. He's like, "You're not going to catch that trout." He already knows. He's like, "You blew that chance."
He's gone.
Yeah.
Stung and gone.
Yep. And but a little ways later, I caught another one, and that was fine. But I had that in the back of my head the whole time.
For sure.
And I still do when I'm fishing after that. I guess, kind of getting off the subject of striped bass, tell us a little bit about your lodge down in the Bahamas.
Yeah, definitely. So I've had, so even when I'm targeting striped bass, I love the sight fishing element. I love to see it. I love to see it all happen. And
that is a incredible thrill.
It's such a thrill.
This year we got into a blitz in the river.
It was chaos
this year.
Just absolute mayhem.
I was stripping a fly back, and I had a fish come up, and I was just dumbfounded. I was like, "Is that a striper?" And then it put its mouth around my fly.
Yep.
And I ripped it out of its mouth. I was just like, I didn't know what to do, and then all I wanted was that moment back.
Yeah.
So I could redo it.
Yeah.
Because I saw everything happening, and I saw it fail, and I was like, "No, come back!" And then that thing was gone.
It happens over like that moment slows down. You can completely replay it. Like
I told Gary it was just like it was a 30-second span of time, probably not even that long.
Yeah.
That was just in slow motion in my head. This fish comes up. I remember the exact spot we were in the river. It's just like it's like shooting at a deer and missing it.
For
And
sure.
playing that
Yeah.
moment
For
back in your
sure.
head over and over again.
Totally.
So
You know, I mean, that whole visual is why I'm in the Bahamas. It's just such an incredible place to
Yeah.
be able to you know, first off, you got these really wonderful intact fisheries. That these island chains, you know, particularly the one that I'm in, there's no runoff, there's no industry.
yeah.
There's, you know, you've got these pristine flats. Our only real threat is development, and we're very lucky to be in a really beautiful spot where we certainly got to keep our head on a swivel, but it's a very intact ecosystem.
Yeah.
You've got miles and miles and miles of shallow water, clear water flats for bonefish and permit, and you know, so as a striped bass guide, I've had these, you know, 7-8 months, this huge off season where I've done all these different things, whether it's guiding in another country or you know, managing somebody else's lodge. And I'm married, I've got a son. You know, that gets out of style, kind of bouncing around.
Yeah.
And so actually my wife and I were managing another lodge for someone else in Andros. You know, people call that the bonefish capital of the world.
Yeah.
And we were loving it. We were having a blast, loving the Bahamian culture, obviously loving the fishing. I feel like a lot of my life I've been plotting about how I can sight fish more, especially, and knowing that the Southeast and the Caribbean is where it's at.
Yeah.
I've ended up finding myself down there, and I definitely have an entrepreneurial mindset, so I had my ears wide open. I'm like, where's a place to do this on my own terms, and do it the way that I want to do it. And so after my first year managing in Andros, I kept hearing whispers about the Berry Islands, and from some people that know their shit. And so it took two people to mention it for me to go check it out. I checked it out in the midst of COVID, and you know, tricky time to travel. It was like
That's a ballsy move too.
complex to get into the Bahamas even, and like you have to get your negative test and submit it and get your travel visa and all this stuff, and doing these trips, and I get back and then have to quarantine, and it was stressful. Like,
And from a business standpoint, that's still a
Super
ballsy
unknown,
move, just
totally.
because you don't know what the economy is going to do. You don't know if people are going to be able to want to travel. You know, it's just so good on you on that.
no, for sure, man. I mean, there was some luck in that. I mean, because we were, you know, I'm a fishing guide, so I needed investors to get this done. So I, you know, it was mostly clients that jumped in, and I undersold it. Hey, do this because this is a fun thing. But we ended up making an offer. We got on a piece of property down there. When it got accepted, we were all like, "Oh shit!" You know?
Fuck, here goes nothing.
We're like,
Now what do
now
we
we're gonna do this? Oh
Yeah.
my god, we're in the middle of COVID. You couldn't really see the light at the end of the tunnel at that point either.
Yeah.
And so we closed, and we kind of pumped the brakes and slowed the process down, and you could finally see this little glimmer. We're like, the timing might be perfect. And so by the time that we opened, people were rapidly returning to travel, and especially the fly fishing community that is used to being able to travel had some serious pent-up demand.
Yeah.
And opening a new place in a new chain of islands that a lot of people haven't heard right under their nose in the Bahamas, we were slammed, and we've been slammed ever since.
Yeah.
So fortunate in that respect.
That's
It
awesome.
just gave us like the mobility to do the stuff we wanted to, and just do the stuff we maybe wanted to do in year 7 or 8. And you know, we feel a lot of responsibility for the community and the people down there and the resource, and putting all of them first. And if we put the resource and the community and our staff first, then like our clients are having an absolute blast.
Yes.
Right.
So
Do you and you employ local people? That's cool.
yeah,
Local
So,
fishing guides and
all
stuff
locals. I mean, that's what makes it fun. It's like working with the Bahamians. Like they're awesome people.
Yeah.
I miss them when I'm gone. I mean, that was like the biggest bummer about hiring managers. It's like I don't get to hang out with my pals
all the time. Yeah,
some of my best friends, and they are some fishy folk, you know.
Yeah.
We got a really cool guide team. Our head guide has been guiding for 57 years.
Jesus.
Our youngest is a phenom at 34. He was born and he was supposed to be a fishing guide.
Yeah.
You know, he's one of those guys that he was like, this is like his calling. Travis Sands, a lot of people have heard of him. Flats fan.
Yeah.
Like he's a badass.
Yeah.
So we're just so fortunate to work with. And, you know, I have to, you know, mention Freddie and Brent and Chester, the rest of our team. Like we've got a really cool guide team and they're a blast to work with. We have a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What nationality, or I mean they're Bahamian, but what are they, French or what? I guess I don't know how to say it and not sound like a complete idiot.
You got to go back to
how
geography
did
in
these people end
7th
up
grade.
in these islands,
Yeah.
kind of. Well, so a lot of it is these are freed slaves.
Okay.
A lot of freed slaves. Like a lot of people that have come from really hard times, you know, generations ago. There's a lot of folks come from Florida. There was a population of Seminole Indians. There was a very gentle, not like seafaring war, indigenous folks called the Lucayans that were there very early on. So you kind of have this whole melting pot of some of these different, you know, these different races and backgrounds. So it's really interesting, especially working down there, like acknowledging the past. I mean, I think we're all product of where we've come from, and so, you know, that's a big piece of understanding the Bahamian culture is just kind of understanding where people have come from and like
I mean, it's sort of like any island in history. It's the islands were for the outcasts, and you know, and that's, you know, whether it was outcast by escaping or outcast by, like, I mean, Australia was the continent of degenerates and prisons. Like, you know, but like, but like those are the most beautiful places and some of the most beautiful people. Like, I mean, it's island time. Like nothing is fast, nothing is hard, nothing is stressed out. It's just, doesn't matter what you do down there. Like we did the Keys for 7 years straight. It's been a 7-year break now. We're finally going back down this year. I fucking can't wait.
Hell yeah.
Because now, like, at first, we went back down. My daughter was just over a year. My oldest was just over a year. My youngest probably was conceived down there. And, like, that was the last time we were down there. And she just turned 9. So, yeah, it's almost 9 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I love it down there.
It's so
and
cool,
it's
man.
we have really good connections with people down there now, and even though it's been 8 years, we still talk once a week on Instagram, like commenting on all their stuff. Like, it's been awesome to watch them grow as guides down there. Yeah. Like, one of my buddies stepped away from guiding, like, completely. He has his captain's license. He's working for his old man pouring concrete, but he's like still fishing with his buddies. And that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, like, do you still enjoy guiding for the fishing? And how much time do you get to actually fish?
Yeah.
Like, cause that's one of the things I told you about we've run into each other on the ramp, whether we knew it or not.
100%. Yeah.
You know, and like a lot of people will ask me, like, why don't you guide? And I'm like, I love it too much. Like, that's my time.
Right.
Not that I don't want to spend it with people that I love and people that I want to fish with. Like, literally anyone that is in my phone that texts me and says, hey, can we go fishing? The answer is yes. Like, I'll figure out a way to not be in the doghouse forever and just be like, yeah, I'm going to go fishing. But it's like, another one of my buddies owns 2 charter boats out of Wells. And I'm like, yeah, when was the last time you went fishing with your kids? And he's like, one day after work. And I'm like, dude, fuck that. Like, I want to be out there with my kids. Like, and that's one of one of the hardest things. Like, I respect for guys that do it for a living. It's awesome. Yeah. I can't bring myself to make that jump.
For sure. You know, I mean, like,
Like
some people, it's like shit where you eat. You know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
This is sacred, and I think for me, it's been all about like having boundaries with it. And I think there's been years where it's out of balance. I think I feel very fortunate in the flow that I'm in now, because with having the lodge and not having like to guide previously with straight bass, it was like, you know, I got to guide every single day that the sun's going to come up.
Just
to
try and make it.
Just to try and make a living.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm 38. I just bought my first place.
Yeah.
You know, like I've grinded in the fly fishing industry to get where I am. I haven't had a leg up, you know. I come from family money where most of the fly fishing industry comes from, you know.
Yeah.
And because it's, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not, I mean, not a lot of people are in it to make money.
Right.
And so for me, like, it's been about trying to find some balance. And honestly, I feel like I'm a much more effective guide when I'm a really good angler.
Yeah.
So I work at my own angling just as much as I do as my guiding, and they're obviously feeding one and another. And you know, in the past few years, I don't get to fish a lot, but I get to fish enough, and I get to pick my times.
Yeah.
And like I probably had like some of my best fishing over the past 3 months, and I haven't fished more than 7 or 8 days.
Yeah.
But I got to pick my days. You know,
Yeah.
Some of it was luck with weather, but other parts were very particular. Like, dude, we got, you know, early September in the Bahamas. We got good tides. We've got typically very stable weather, and the fish have been rested all summer.
Yeah.
And it's banger permit time. So I had my best permit fishing day of my life with one of our guides in training. I mean, we saw 170 fish before noon.
Jesus.
I don't say this to be boastful. It's just the day that we had.
Yeah.
It was just insane. There were
Yeah.
fish everywhere. And we didn't pull more than 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, dude, we're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, we got 3 permit to hand before noon. I mean, which is like, I'll remember that day for the rest of my life.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I don't get, like, that's an example of, like, I don't get the quantity of days, but I get the quality of days. And I try and take them where I can. And, like, when I was in the Bahamas last week, it was blowing 35 and raining. Felt terrible for our clients that were down there.
You're like, wow.
Shitty. Yeah,
God, mostly. They're really, I mean, it's just, that's you know, that's fishing.
It's the industry.
Sometimes
it's fishing.
you're making withdrawals, sometimes you're depositing into your karma box, you know.
And that's how we treated the Keys. Like I've fly fished twice in the Keys out of the 7 years we went down there, and all the times, I mean, it was similar. It didn't matter what the weather was. It was like, all right, that's the day, because our friends up here, he would take his boat down.
Right.
So he had a 34-foot center down there that we would go offshore in. And then we had all the friends around there, like a couple guys that had Hell's Bays that were like either starting guiding or had been guiding.
Yep.
But I just shoot him a text like, hey, how's your Tuesday? And he's like, well, I'm free, but it's going to blow 40. And it's like, well, hope we can tuck in somewhere in the Everglades. Like,
exactly.
We went out some days where it was like, you know, it's just 3 to 4 foot chop in the Everglades.
Right.
That's not fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, you're in a 18-foot Hell's Bay just getting the shit kicked out of you. And it's like, I mean, this was pointless, but it's still getting out there. And it's like,
for sure.
But
And I feel like I just, I think I reflect a lot about the industry, and especially, you know, catering to so many and people in their pursuits. And like, it's all about expectation.
Right.
And like, you know, I think my expectations are just like, I want to be just out there, and I want to just have that moment where your head's clear, and like, that's enough these days.
Yeah,
and,
that's exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
Like I look at fly fishing, hunting, any like fly tying, anything in that spectrum. Like when I'm doing it, I can melt away everything else around me.
Totally.
And if I could do that, then it was successful.
For sure.
And I've gone weeks without catching fish, or like being successful with it, and it really doesn't bother me. It's like that one thing in my life that I don't care if I have control over it,
Right.
because I'm just happy I'm doing it.
Totally.
And I think
It's
with
amazing.
you, like being, obviously you want to be able to fish, but I think you just love that industry so much, And especially now, because it seems like your guides and your employees and people you work with, it's more like family than it is anything else. So if you're there, you're there.
For sure.
You're enjoying it. Whether
That's
you're
like
guiding
all the tangential stuff. Like I get just so excited when one of our guides guides somebody to a cool fish or something special. Like it's just
almost like you caught it.
Yeah,
you know?
you're soaking in all that goodness, and to just I think a lot of it for me is mindset, and I try and fish the quality days that I can, and I still work hard at my own craft. I cast a lot. I tie a lot of flies. I work hard at my own craft and have like a competitiveness with myself. But when it gets time to be on the boat, it's just like clear the head, clear the expectation, and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, half the times I get a chance to go out alone, which I don't do very often due to 2 children. And then like I want to go out with, like, whether it's Huey, my old man lives in town still. We fish a ton together. Other friends coming down random days. But like I have like a requirement for like at least 3 or 4 days in the summer where I'll go launch the boat myself, go out at sunrise, and half the time I rip to the nubble from Kittery just to fly. And it's like it doesn't matter what the fuck that week took out of me. It's like by the time I get to the nubble, I'm like, all right, well, I just burned fucking $60 in fuel, but fuck, was that awesome?
You're free, man.
Yeah, we've gone days. We'll go out and fish for 4 or 5 hours and not catch a thing, not even hook one.
Right.
And we get back to the dock and we're like,
why
do we have to go home?
Yeah, I'll do that again.
Go back out.
I know. I mean, it's just the perfect way to hang. You know? Like
it
it's
really
the
is.
perfect hang.
Yeah.
And I don't think my wife gets it as much, or she gets it, but she doesn't get it. You know, I think she's getting better with it, but
it's funny who my wife, who would never be a hardcore angler, but like she works her butt off for the lodge. She's my partner.
Yeah,
like we make it run. We made it successful. Like, and same thing before. We've met, so she's become like, she's been able to spend these times in like these incredible places. Like, she came down when I was like guiding and training in Argentina for my preseason, and like gets to fish for golden dorado for 2 weeks while I'm training. And she like, so she's got to have some cool experiences. And now she's like, all I really want to do is just be able to see the fish and see the fish eat fly. She is like gone through this accelerated program of like she's like, I don't want to just blind cast to the rocks for stripers. All right, can you show me one that like is gonna in like a foot and a half of water, like tailing? I'm like, all right, well, we'll see if we can do that.
That's on like August 17th. If the moon is waxing, we're good.
Totally.
And like it's funny you mentioned it, like I've gotten so much more into trout fishing because of that, like the presentation and being able to see fish. And reluctantly like nymphing some. I fucking hate. I was a very much a dry fly purist. Like I was a 3-weight gang dry fly purist. And then got my ass handed to me up on the McGalloway a few times this summer, and finally was like, all right, fuck it. We're gonna learn dry droppers. We're gonna learn streamers. We're gonna that's just such a special waterway and such an amazing way to catch fish up there. And it's still like, but my favorite fish of the year was watching, it was only probably a 15-inch brook trout, but it's a native Maine brook trout come up out of a pool in the sun, hit a fucking dry fly. And I was like, all right, well, I literally could not give a fuck if I catch another fish the rest of the year. Like it's, seeing a fish and being able to, it's why I'm a huge duck hunter. Was my biggest passion. I think fly fishing may have passed it at this point, but like that's one of those things where it's like you've gone out, you've fooled nature to think that whatever you set up is nature, and they're landing in your face
for sure.
And it's like that's where I get to with fly fishing, where it's like similar to like what you were saying about your wife. It's like I kind of don't want to just throw a fly into the rocks and hope for the best. I want to see that fish.
For
like,
sure.
or at least want to see a take.
Yep.
Like, seeing a take is bar none.
I saw one.
For sure.
I'll never unsee
Yeah.
it either.
It's such a spectrum, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you start ending up in like, I think some people are like, oh, you know, like you're getting on that snobby end of the spectrum, but I don't think it's that. I think it's just that like, I'm just happy to let a couple fish walk that I might not be able to see.
Yeah.
For that like special moment.
Yeah.
You know, and like to stand on the bow and look at a flat, like be tasked. This is your task for the day. All you gotta do is go look out at this beautiful scenery and see if you see something. If you do, then cast at it.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty simple, you know. And I think like we're all looking for something, you know, and to be able to connect to that deeper meaning in the outdoors is like a really cool thing.
It's
know?
huge.
Well,
And to do it with expectation free,
Yep.
Yeah.
you know, around this cool sport that we all share is like pretty magical.
And that's where, like, when you mentioned, because you had mentioned before we started recording about tidal roots and stuff, like, so my family owns a place on Brave Boat Harbor.
Cool.
And, like, that is one of my favorite spots to go pull into in the boat.
It's magical.
And, like, this year I took a buddy of ours, Ian, in there, and we were literally, I shut the boat off. I had my push pole. And I'm standing up and I'm watching a striper go across. And like, as soon as one of us made like the slightest movement, the fish darted. And it's like, how the fuck did that thing hear it? But it was still like, that's my favorite moment from the whole summer fishing.
Yeah.
Was like a 22-inch striper just in gin clear water swimming away.
For sure.
No
Yeah.
fucking fish were caught that day,
Yeah.
but it was fucking awesome. And it's
Yep.
like, that's what I want to like remember. Like,
Yeah.
and my wife, before her shoulder issues, where she would paddleboard it, and she was like, "Hey, saw like 12 stripers in there. Like,
Yeah.
you should get the boat in." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Okay." Like, and that's my wife is. She's been 3 years now going through shoulder issues. Hasn't been able to fish or paddleboard, but she still knows. And thank God she's as good as she is, because she still allows me the time to be an absolute maniac when it comes to fishing and hunting season.
Yeah. I think we're both lucky in that. Probably all three of us are lucky in
Yeah.
that aspect, because as much as my wife doesn't get it sometimes, like when I text Garrett or when I text her and be like, I'm leaving the house at 2 a.m. to go fish for the day in Rangeley
Right.
Yeah.
on a Sunday, my only day off, and she's like, "You sure you want to do that?" 100. Like
Yeah.
she doesn't even question it. Like she knows
Yeah.
that it's going to happen and that I need to do it. And you know, I get home at 10 o'clock at night. It's like, man, that was a long fucking day, but I do it again
Yeah.
the next day.
For sure.
It's just it.
It's not draining.
No.
It
No.
doesn't. I mean,
With you,
It's
it's
like,
like
you might be tired, but it just filled your soul up, and you're
Yeah.
Yeah.
good to go.
if you
for the
if
week,
you do if
you
you're
know?
doing something you love, you never work a day in your life. I guess
know.
I'm sure you have to tell yourself that a lot. And my question, as far as the lodge goes, somebody calls or emails and says, "I want to come fish with you." Is there a vetting process that you do, or is it beginner, anybody come fish?
You know, it's more about like people's outlook.
Yeah.
I think
What their expectations are?
yeah, I figured out like if somebody wants to come catch like 50 bonefish a day, they're not our guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
For one, that's incredibly hard expectation to meet. But you know, we really want people, like I talk to people about, like I describe it as like it's quality over quantity.
Yeah.
For one. So come for quality. Come for that big bonefish, come for a permit, come for the you know, the diversity of species, which
Yeah.
is special. You don't get that in every part of the Bahamas. And the fishing can be technical and challenging.
Yeah.
You know? So like the end of the day, I tell people like that enjoy it. They enjoy those parts that I just mentioned, but they love the community. They love the vibe that we've got at the lodge. Like it really is family. It
Yeah.
sounds cliche, but it's like it really is a family. And we built the whole team on that mentality, and like it just like, you know, everybody just vibes
Yeah.
so well. Like the guides, we're not like mandating the guides to come over and have a beer with you in the evening. Like the guides
They
want to
want-
be
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
They want to come over. They want to shoot the shit with Annie and Cara, who are, serving apps and see Chef in the kitchen and Ramona and so that's.
And I think that's huge
such
for clientele too. Like if
Totally.
they see that, they're gonna want to come back and be part of it.
For
Like,
sure.
It brings them.
And the people that come back, they get that, and I think too, that's the stuff that takes the pressure off the fishery.
Yeah.
Don't expect more than you can get out of all of our fisheries. Don't
Yeah.
have, there can be that mentality that's just a little bit. I can just travel to these remote parts of the world and get get everything I want. And I think whether it's fishing locally or fishing abroad, it's lower the expectations. And
Yep.
the more we can enjoy our moments on the water without having to have banner days, the happier you're going to be day in, day out in your own fishery, and the better the resource is going to be.
Yeah.
And so we think a lot about how do we reduce pressure? How do we spread pressure over different species? Bonefish get hit the hardest, and they're the trickiest to manage because they're a finicky fish that swims in 6 inches of water.
Yeah.
So you start pushing them hard, you start seeing results from that. So it's I think all of us in this fishing world can learn a lot from that, and I certainly don't take for granted that I'm living it every day of the year, because people that get 5 days out of the year to go do it, they're charged up.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's where even guys around here, one of the things with talking with as many guides as we're now friends with, where it's just hire a guide. If you're worried about having a bad day and you only have a limited amount of days, instead of going out, as much as I love Jim at Eldridge Brothers, instead of dropping fucking $2,000 at him trying to go do it yourself, literally just hire a guide.
Yeah.
And you learn so much.
You'll learn more, and then next year, maybe.
Most guides, most guides want you to learn. They want you to have that knowledge.
Right.
They want you to enjoy the fishery just like they do. They're not in it for, most of the trout, especially trout fishing guides, are not in it to be a millionaire. They're in it because they love it, and it gave them a gateway to do more fishing.
Yeah.
And with our buddy Aaron, he took us up, and I went on that trip with zero expectations, and I probably had, we didn't catch a ton of fish, but I had the best time that I've ever had trout fishing on the Megalo,
That's awesome.
in that area.
Yeah.
My grandfather, he's the one who got me into fly fishing. He grew up in northern Maine, fished all those backcountry ponds and stuff like that. Now, during the summer, he has a place on Cupsuptic Lake and trolls. That's what he does now. It's easier for him to do it. I went out trolling with him 2 days this year, and zero expectations again. We caught a couple fish, but just being on the water with him, that's
cool, man.
that beats everything.
I know.
So
I know.
it's but I'm sure there's some lodges out there that are in it for money, which I think to a point we all are.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to have that vibe that you have at your place.
Totally.
And it's awesome to hear it.
And I see I take that as the more we push these really wonderful sides of the fishery and our team, honestly, it's going to return profit for us.
Yeah.
And with that profit, we can do more for the community. We can do more for our team. We can give raises instead of being in a mentality of let's make more money by paying shitty.
Yeah.
Where you have a team that's disconnected and
doesn't want to.
I've been on both sides of that for sure. I've managed under that regime, and now I own under a regime where we have a lot of harmony.
Yeah.
And we're doing okay.
It's funny to see that change of, it's sort of every industry is kind of, I think, going through that change where I think our generation is more of if you actually gave a fuck about us,
right,
we give a lot more to you. Because and that's how it was, I think, like 2 generations ago, where people had ownership of their life and ownership of their work, where it was work was a family, work was everything. And then somewhere in the middle, so much money got involved, and then you lost that disconnect. And now those people that don't have it are sitting there like, well, why don't you guys give a shit? And it's like, well, give me a reason to fucking care, and I will. Like, I live in corporate America. Like, it is, I work for the largest power company in North America. It's fucking miserable. Like, they don't give a fuck. Like, I'm one of 35,000 employees. Like, they don't really care at the end of the day. But it's like, but they want you to. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't take much to make me care. Like, really. Just pay me and give me my time to fish. Like,
and I work in a small family-run business, and it's like, I'm not family, but I've felt like family for the past 20 years. They've taken, like, my grandfather that I called, I'm not even related to him. He started that company in his basement, and has taken him and his son have taken me in over the years. And so I see that vibe, and I see him as an owner, like, he's happy when I go buy a new truck, because it's like, he did that, you know. It's a huge return on investment for him,
for sure.
Which is it's an eye opener, and you see it what Garrett does, and you see it in a lot of industries that some people just don't have it, and it's too bad.
Yeah, for sure.
I wish they did. But, any final thoughts?
Man, it's just a pleasure to hang with you guys.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Anytime you're welcome to come by.
Like I normally, like, you know, Micah, my son, is, you know, getting down for bed. I'm asleep by 8:30. This is, you know, having a beer chat with you guys is an absolute delight.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
We record pretty much once a week.
Yeah.
Schedules are always crazy.
That's awesome.
With family stuff, but we've been
family and work.
For the most part, we're fairly competent. Sometimes we go off on random tangents, but it's
we've learned to stay away from politics.
Yeah.
That's where I've gotten.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good thing about fishing. Like, fishing, you don't need
right. We
politics.
got common ground. We don't have to get into the politics.
Exactly.
I mean, unfortunately, with the striper stuff, obviously you got to go.
Sure.
You're going to DC,
You dabble.
and
right. You dabble.
But it's I don't know.
But I feel like that's one of the things. I mean, like, I've talked about it. Like, one of our best friends, Ian, extremely liberal in his politics. I'm not so much, but like, we come to a common ground over hunting and fishing.
Yep.
And that's when, like, he and I were talking one day, and we were like, you know, it's really country versus city. It's not left and right. It's like people that give a fuck about the outdoors and people that abuse the outdoors.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's like, I don't really care. Like, do I want to save open space? 100%. Well, that means you're liberal. Yeah, but I want to also shoot ducks with guns. Wow. You can't be liberal then. It's like
BHA.
Yeah.
You know, you've got, you know, hunters and anglers coming together to get more access to the goodness.
Yeah.
We just, actually, I was just reading today, we just, as an outdoor industry, we just surpassed $1 trillion industry mark.
That's awesome.
Which is enormous.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that.
Well,
puts
I'd
us
like
at,
to say that I'm a good portion of that. Too.
Yeah, I want to come on and just personally thank you guys for your contribution. For,
Fish Pond just dropped a new bag. Fuck.
Yeah, I literally just came from KTP, actually, just setting up my first bow.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, I'm so excited.
Oh, that's the cool part about it. The gear, like,
I know
you get to build all this. Like, I bought in the past month, I think I bought 3 different fly rods, and I don't know what I'm going to use them next. And my wife's like, "Don't you already have a fly rod?" I'm like, "Yes, but I don't have this fly rod."
Yeah.
Right.
So now I need to get
How
real
is this
for
one
it.
different?
Yeah, exactly.
It's still 9 feet.
Well, yeah. Well, and that's the cool thing that I think we're seeing a tide turn, and I like. Do you know Greg Labonte at all?
I've heard the name.
Maine Fly Guys.
Yeah, of course.
His big thing is like making it accessible for everyone. So he sells, you know, very, very reasonably priced lines, reels, and that he just came out with his own rod.
Yeah, I just bought one of his rods.
Yeah.
Like, you could get a 5-weight rod, 9 foot, for $150. And then you could buy a preloaded, good quality reel with with a floating line on it for less than $100.
Yeah.
And he's making those things because he bases it as I was a college kid trying to figure out if I was going to have gas or leaders.
Right.
And nobody should have to do that. Like, if you want to go fishing, you should be able to go fishing.
Totally.
And getting kids in the out, I'm sure with your son, I mean, your son is extremely lucky to have a dad like you just growing up, around it, which is going to be, and hopefully I'm sure someday he'll recognize that.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But it's also got to be tough to be raising a son in this industry.
It's also a very delicate balance. I can say this from experience of like,
I don't have kids, so
just dropping, like, because I look at like what I was afforded as a kid, and I know how much my parents sacrificed for like my sports growing up. And like, I mean, you walked in the house, my daughter was like, "Oh, look at this bag that I got," and so all this, and it's like,
I got a soccer game.
yeah, and I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, you know how much that fucking bag and all the shit that's in it just cost me.
Right.
And but then again, like in my brain is like, that money does not matter.
Sure.
It's a hard thing for my wife to understand, because she's like, I still have to this day have not told her how much my daughter going to play Premier Soccer has cost me. I'm just like, yeah, it was just a little bit more than what we were gonna plan on, but it's okay because we got some money back. Don't worry about it. Yeah. But it's like, but that's how I treat going out with them too. Like taking them out fishing, taking them out doing whatever is like, look, these are experiences. Like, I look at it because my grandfather was a registered Maine guide.
Cool.
Fly fish the Allagash by float plane, like
Wow.
did the whole thing. Like, never taught my father how to fly fish. My father only knew how to tuna fish because he was with my grandfather on the tuna boat. But my grandfather never took my father fly fishing. I taught my father how to fly fish.
Yeah.
My dad never got into really duck hunting. My grandfather was a huge duck hunter.
Yeah.
And it was like growing up and like helping my dad learn that. I was like, man, I don't want that for I want to bring my kids with me on all these journeys.
Sure.
And like my dad made a huge point to like bring me duck hunting when I was little and younger, but it was, 13 years old going duck hunting with dad or go to play soccer with all your friends. Like,
Right.
I pick soccer all the time, and it's like my daughter now will say like, oh, she gets bummed out when she has to go to soccer instead of come hunting. And I'm like,
Right.
well, look, I want you to enjoy soccer. There will be time to hunt. Like, don't worry.
Yeah.
And it's like balancing the family life, but cost doesn't matter.
No.
Fuck it.
It's so true, man.
one of the funniest conversations I ever had with my wife about fishing was when I was getting into tying.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, this will save us a bunch of money."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honey, it will.
I was like, "Oh yeah, it's
Just
gonna."
in the long run.
Yeah.
Don't
And
look
then
at
she's
the-
like, "What did you buy at Eldridge Brothers?" I was like, "Oh, some feathers." She was like, "For $70?"
Yeah.
Well, I need them. I'm saving us money.
Yeah.
You know how many flies I can tie with that?
That's the biggest crock of shit that every fly shop has
Oh
come
my
up with.
God, yeah. And then you go through something like, I just had all my fly tying stuff packed up and I got moths and all of it.
Oh.
I didn't even know this was an issue. I was seeing, I just see all these moths flying around. I'm like, I just had all my bucktails destroyed.
Oh no.
But
Yeah.
anywho, we'll get it.
Yeah.
Go see Jim.
Yeah, totally. Actually, thank you, Ben Wally, who just brought me like 20 bucktails, and he's a great tire and
Yeah.
who she'd have on.
Ben is awesome.
I've actually messaged him.
Yeah.
I haven't received a message back, but he's a busy guy. So,
He's a good cat.
yeah. He
Those-
ties a lot of cool flies.
Yeah.
So
He's getting pretty technical with a lot of his flies too.
they're incredible.
I just don't have like Ian
I want
has
to take one of his classes at Eldridge Brothers.
Yeah.
Ian has the patience. Like Ian loves to tie those fucking articulated flies.
Like the game changers and stuff like that.
Give me a
Yeah.
clouser and fucking see you later. Like,
Fly tying has become like my jam because I have some physical limitations and stuff that don't let me get out fishing as much as I want to. But fly tying has been like that creative outlet for me that I've never ever had.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy it. And
Yeah.
like I'm tying chubby Chernobyls that I think I've fished once in my life, but it's just they're fun to tie, so I'm tying a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So
We used to do. We got to get back on it now because it's back to winter.
Yeah,
But
Right.
like we would do,
Tying season
we would
now.
do a Monday night tie Zoom
yeah.
because Ian used to be the brewer at Tributary, and then he went to Northwoods. Then he went to Apres, and now he's working for
Some hot
a malt house. But he moved up to Lisbon. I'm like, bro, you can't leave down here.
But
Like,
he lives like 5 minutes from the Androscoggin.
Yeah.
So, but we get together, we tie. I think we tie more than we actually fish together.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but it is what it is. So, but I really want to thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
It was a great combo.
Good luck in DC, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep fighting for the good stuff. For
That's
sure,
all we can
for
do.
all of us.
And you're more than welcome to come back anytime.
Thank
like
you.
I said,
Yeah.
this isn't actually my house, but you can come
Yeah,
over.
just come in.
Yeah, I appreciate the open
Yeah.
invite.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to hear how the soccer game went tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll come out for a beer in the afternoon.
Yeah. Soccer game's late, 7:00. It's fucking brutal. I'm like U10 soccer at 7:00 on a Tuesday.
3 hours after sunset. Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
Right?
I gotta get up and hunt the next day, and I'm like, means I gotta get home, get the boat ready. Fuck.
Priorities, right?
This-
Well, thank you guys. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We'll keep hanging, man. We're all in New York.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're in Sanford, but we'll
I'm-
make it happen.
I'm in here all the time.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.